Word came from my cousin Linda before I even pulled into the mall parking garage. Dad's new 60-year-old fiancée, Martha, was only 50, and every single extended relative swore she was just hunting his suburban home and retirement for a 1K. I'm 32, self-made boutique brand founder. My mom passed in a highway crash when I was 10. Dad raised me solo for 22 years without dating a soul, so I refused to shoot down his quiet shot at happiness, no matter how loud the gossip screamed. Linda's shrill voice blared through my car Bluetooth the second I shut off the engine. You're really dropping six figures on a solid gold heirloom bracelet for a woman who's clearly grifting your dad's life savings? Are you out of your damn mind? I twisted the velvet jewelry box between my palms, metal weight heavy through the fabric. He hasn't smiled this bright since mom was alive. I'm not stripping that joy away over assumptions. Linda huffed so loud the speakers crackled. Fine, play the naive saint. But I'm showing up to the wedding reception with you, and if she's so much as bats an eye at his property deed, I'm publicly calling her out in front of every aunt, uncle, and family acquaintance. I hung up without pushing back, staring at my reflection in the garage elevator's stainless steel panel, short sharp bob, minimalist black wool blazer, tiny pearl studs I'd inherited from mom. I looked put together, unshakable on the surface, but my palms sweated through the box's silk lining. I dug a third of my startup's first profit pool into this bracelet, handpicked the heaviest 188-gram solid piece the luxury jeweler stocked, requested the engraving harmony in every season for Dad Arthur and Martha's new life together. I'd run full background checks weeks prior, all results plain on my laptop. Martha spent 20 years on a textile factory line before the plant shut down, bounced between grocery stocker and commercial kitchen dishwasher shifts to scrape by, widowed young when her husband's construction accident left her alone with a teen son named Tyler, who worked warehouse shifts 3 states away. No trust funds, no hidden real estate, no fancy connections, just a woman who'd spent 3 decades grinding minimum wage to survive. None of that quieted my blood relatives' relentless rumors, though. Every family cookout turned into a roundtable rant about Martha's greedy hidden agenda the second Dad mentioned engagement 6 months back. My phone buzzed mid-jewelry checkout. Dad's text lighting the screen. Martha made homemade peach cobbler for me to eat before the reception. She's been practicing the recipe mom used to bake for birthdays. A silly heart emoji tagged the message. Dad had never touched phone emojis before Martha walked into his life, a tiny, tangible marker of how deeply she'd shifted his lonely routine. That single heart icon settled my nerves enough to slide the black card across the counter for the bracelet's charge. The wedding venue was a mid-tier event hall outside the city. No flashy floral displays or expensive catering. Dad insisted small, intimate, only close kin, too embarrassed to parade a late-life marriage after decades of widowhood. The welcome banner hung by the entrance, Arthur Hale and Martha Carter. New beginnings, their candid park photo printed across the vinyl. Dad's crinkly smile stretched wide enough to crinkle every wrinkle around his eyes. Linda sidled up beside me the second I paused to stare at the banner, scarlet cocktail dress bright enough to outshine every floral centerpiece in the ballroom. See Linda from across the lobby? She spent 3 months trash-talking Martha behind every family member's back. Now she's clinging to her arm like they're childhood best friends, Linda muttered, jerking her chin toward my gossip-hungry distant cousin. I glanced over to confirm it. Linda's fake grin stretched ear to ear, Martha's thin frame swallowed by a muted burgundy tea-length dress, hands twisting the hem nonstop like she couldn't relax around the crowd of judgmental strangers. Her skin carried faint sunspots and fine wrinkles makeup couldn't fully conceal, nothing like the manipulative gold digger the family had unanimously painted her as for months. Dad spotted me 2 seconds later, rushing over in a brand charcoal suit he'd splurged on just for the day, hair freshly dyed to cover gray strands. Thank you for coming, baby girl. This means the whole world to me, he said, voice thick with emotion, refusing to grab the jewelry box I held out. Give it straight to Martha. It's your gift to her, not mine. Martha stepped forward slow, footsteps light, voice soft with a faint rural twang left over from her small hometown upbringing. Hi, Sarah. Martha, congratulations, I replied, pressing the velvet box into her outstretched hands. Wishing you and Dad every good day ahead. She fumbled the lid open, gold catching the ballroom's crystal chandeliers hard enough to draw gasps from the surrounding relatives clustered to watch the exchange. Murmurs rippled through the group instantly, every relative calculating the bracelet's insane price tag out loud. Martha's lips trembled so hard she couldn't form a coherent sentence, fingers brushing the thick band like she couldn't believe someone would spend this much money welcoming her into our broken little family. Let me help you put it on, I offered, taking the bracelet from her shaky grasp and sliding it over her paper-thin wrist. The heavy gold hung loose against her forearm, her skin rough with decades of factory calluses pressed briefly against mine. I swear I'll take care of Arthur for every single remaining year he has, she whispered, tears pooling in her hazel eyes, gripped tight around my wrist before she pulled away. I won't let him regret choosing me. Linda nudged my ribs hard behind my back, silent warning etched across her face, but I only gave Martha a gentle smile and stepped back to let the wedding officiant kick off the short ceremony. The vows were brief, no over-the-top poetry, just quiet promises of companionship through aging and hardship. After the toast round, we settled at the main dinner table, Linda glued to my side ready to intercept any snark directed at Martha. Cousin Linda wasted zero time stirring trouble once the salad course hit the table, leaning across the linen tablecloth to stare straight at Martha. Martha, Arthur owns that $1 million school district house all on his own. You too ought to add your name to that property deed real quick, don't you think? All these second marriages end messy, without legal protection for the new spouse. Dad's jaw locked tight, tone sharp enough to cut through the room's chatter. Linda, you've had too much champagne. Drop the subject. The whole ballroom went dead silent, every guest's gaze locked onto our table. Martha's shoulders curled inward, had dropped to stare at her water glass, embarrassed enough to shrink into her seat. I pushed my chair back slow, lifting my wine glass high so every person within hearing distance caught my calm, unyielding tone. Today is their wedding day. Any property debates or family suspicions can wait until tomorrow's private family call. Tonight we celebrate their marriage, nothing more. I drained the glass's entire contents in one swallow, burning alcohol searing my throat, and set it down hard enough to quiet Linda's half-formed retort. The rest of the meal passed with stiff, awkward small talk. Martha stuck close to Dad's hip during the table-to-table toast rounds, barely speaking unless spoken to directly. BY 9 p.m. Most relatives cleared out, drunken lingering by the front doors to corner Dad and rehashed their unending worries about Martha's motives. Linda offered me a ride home, but I declined, booking a rideshare to drop me back at my downtown condo. I lingered by the venue's sidewalk waiting for my driver when Martha snuck up behind me, stripped out of the formal dress into a faded flannel jacket, hands clenched around a crumpled plastic bank card. Before I could ask what she was holding, she forced the card into my palm, fingers squeezing tight enough to ache my knuckles. I know every single one of your family members thinks I'm here to drain Arthur dry. I know you dropped a fortune on that bracelet just to signal you accept our marriage. Even if you're terrified I'll break his heart. This is my peace offering. Take it. Don't argue with me. Her voice cracked with suppressed sobs, eyes glistening under the street lamp's pale glow. Your birthday is the pin, memorize it. I tried shoving the card back into her grasp, but she spun on her heel and vanished around the venue's brick side alley before I could finish protesting. I stuffed the worn blue debit card into my crossbody bag without a second thought, figuring it held a couple $1,000s max as a small, awkward gesture of gratitude. The rideshare pulled up seconds later, and I climbed into the back seat, mind spinning nonstop over Martha's odd, desperate gift. Once I unlocked my condo front door, I dumped my bag on the leather sofa and stripped off my blazer, heading straight for the shower to wash the day's tension off my skin. Hot water did nothing to quiet the looping questions bouncing around my skull, so once I tell my hair dry, I dragged my laptop onto the coffee table and pulled the scuffed debit card out of the bag's inner pocket. I typed the card number into my bank's third-party balance checker, input my birthday as the passcode without hesitation, and hovered my cursor over the submit button while sipping cold lemon water. The screen loaded for 2 full seconds before the number popped into sharp, unignorable view. $30,000, 6 full digits stacked across the digital balance display. My ceramic water mug slipped straight out of my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor in a shower of white shards, cold liquid soaking my sweatpants. I didn't move an inch, eyes glued to the screen, recounting the digit groups over and over to make sure I hadn't misread the figure. A former textile factory line worker surviving on minimum wage dishwashing and grocery stocking shifts had handed me a debit card holding $30,000 in cold, untraceable savings. I sank down onto the wet floor amid broken ceramic, quiet laughter bubbling up that quickly dissolved into hot, confused tears. Who was Martha Carter, really? How had a woman living paycheck to paycheck amass that staggering sum of cash without hidden side hustles, secret inheritances, or ulterior motives tied to my father's assets? I barely slept that night, replaying the debit card's balance on a loop behind my eyelids until sunrise bled through my bedroom window and my phone's alarm buzzed at 7 a.m. Dad's name lighting the screen before I could hit snooze, his voice shaky with quiet anxiety the second I answered. Martha stayed up until 4 this morning baking peach cobbler, your mom's exact recipe. She memorized it after I rambled about you missing the dessert as a kid. I'm outside your condo lobby with a tin, 5 minutes tops if you can swing down. I threw on sweatpants and a faded hoodie without bothering to cover the dark purple under-eye bags from sleeplessness, wiping leftover tear tracks off my cheeks before heading for the elevator. When I pulled open Dad's car passenger door, Martha sat in the front seat beside him, flour dusted across her apron, fingers twisting a linen dish towel raw with nervous fidgeting the second she spotted me. The interior of Dad's modest suburban ranch had transformed entirely in the months since Martha moved in. Fresh warm-toned curtains lined every window, hand-knit throw blankets draped each sofa cushion, cut fruit pre-portioned with toothpicks sat on the coffee table when we stepped through the front door 10 minutes later. Small, gentle touches no one had bothered within the 20 years since Mom's death, all Martha's quiet handiwork. Sit, I brewed chamomile tea for you. Figured the wedding stress left you wired, Martha said, sliding a brand new daisy-printed bone china mug across the table toward me, yanking her hand back fast the second our fingertips brushed like physical contact made her uncomfortable. Dad wandered back into the kitchen to monitor the cobbler's oven timer, leaving Martha and me alone in the living room, thick unspoken tension hanging between us like heavy fog. I pulled the $30,000 debit card out of my crossbody bag and set it flat on the oak coffee table between our chairs, watching Martha's face drain of all color instantly. I can't accept this money. Martha, $30,000 is far too large a gift to take from you, I said flat, keeping my tone neutral to avoid sounding accusatory. Where did this entire sum even come from? Every background search I ran only showed minimum wage labor income spanning 20 years. Martha's gaze locked onto the scuffed plastic card, lips pressed into a thin, trembling line for a full minute before she finally broke her silence, voice barely loud enough to cut through the distant hum of the kitchen oven fan. I saved every single cent myself, factory paycheck after factory paycheck, every dishwasher tip and grocery stocking overtime hour tucked away into that separate account. 20 years of minimum wage labor can't accumulate $30,000 without outside funding, I countered, leaning forward slightly to hold her eye contact, refusing to let her dodge the core question hanging over us. There's a piece of this story you're intentionally hiding from me and Dad. Martha reached up to brush her fingers over the solid gold bracelet still wrapped tight around her wrist, expression softening into a mournful, worn grief I hadn't seen surface at the wedding reception. Everyone assumes I married Arthur to lock down his house and monthly retirement check, right? I lost my husband to a construction fall when Tyler was only 10, raised my son entirely alone on factory wages, empty quiet apartments every night for 15 years straight. I'd lie awake listening to nothing but my own heartbeat in the silence for months on end. She paused, swallowing hard to hold back fresh tears. I met Arthur on a city park bench 3 years ago, sitting there crying over how lonely my life had become, and he handed me a pack of tissues without pushing me to spill every detail of my pain. He rambled for hours about losing your mom young, how he regretted never giving her a comfortable, easy life while she was alive. He didn't pressure me for my phone number or a date, just offered quiet companionship, no strings attached. Dad's footsteps echoed from the kitchen doorway mid-conversation, carrying a steaming platter of peach cobbler glazed with homemade caramel syrup. Martha cut her story off instantly, swiping stray tear tracks off her cheeks before he could spot her distress, shifting gears to ramble about the cobbler's baking process like our tense money discussion had never happened. Dad set the platter down between us, oblivious to the charged atmosphere hanging thick in the air. Martha's been tending to all your mother's old flower beds out back too. They were wilting away for years. Now every rose bush is blooming full again. He gestured toward the backyard sliding glass door with a proud grin, says flowers need consistent care the exact same way people do. No neglect allowed if you want them to thrive. I bit into a warm cobbler slice, sweet peach syrup melting across my tongue, and seized the quiet opening Dad's small talk gave me to slip in a subtle, loaded question about Martha's factory work history. What line position did you hold at the textile plant all those years? Factory machinery always sounded brutal for 8-hour shifts. Martha's fork froze midair above her plate, jaw tightening for half a second before she forced a casual, dismissive shrug. Standard loom operator. Nothing glamorous. Loud metal equipment running nonstop, standing shifts 12 hours during busy seasonal production weeks. Factory machinery malfunctions happen all the time, right? Did you ever suffer any workplace injuries back then? I pressed, watching every micro-expression flicker across her face for a telltale reaction. Dad's had snapped over to Martha instantly, curiosity flickering across his features. She hesitated for 3 long heartbeats before rolling up her left sleeve, revealing a pale, jagged scar snaking from her wrist all the way up to her elbow's inner curve, skin permanently warped around the old wound site. A loom's unguarded roller caught my hand 5 years back, pulled my forearm into the machinery before coworkers hit the emergency shutoff. Spent 2 full months in the hospital recovering, permanent nerve damage still flares up when the weather turns cold. Her tone stayed deliberately casual, like a life-altering workplace disfigurement amounted to a minor scraped knee. The factory covered basic hospital bills and tossed a small cash compensation check my way after the injury settlement wrapped up. Nothing life-changing. Dad grabbed her scarred wrist instantly, eyes wide with shocked, heartbroken pity he'd never shown prior. Martha had lied to him for months, claiming the mark stemmed from a childhood kitchen burn instead of a brutal factory industrial accident. Guilt twisted sharp through my chest. I'd spent weeks digging up private background intel on her, yet she'd hidden a traumatic, life-altering injury from the man she'd agreed to spend her remaining years with. The rest of lunch carried a heavy, unspoken weight between all 3 of us. Martha piled extra cobbler and roasted veggies onto my plate nonstop, but barely touched her own food. Every glance she shot my way laced with quiet fear I'd expose her half-truths to Dad and tear their fragile, new marriage apart. Once the meal wrapped up, I offered to tackle the mountain of dirty dishes stacked by the sink, but Martha physically blocked my path to the kitchen door, hands firm on my shoulders to steer me back toward the living room sofa. Go sit and catch up with Arthur. I've got all cleanup handled alone, she insisted, tone unnegotiable. Dad dragged me out onto the back patio once Martha retreated to scrub plates, hand landing heavy on my shoulder as we stared out at the blooming rose bushes Mom had planted decades prior. You've been digging into Martha's past, haven't you? I spotted the private investigator receipt tucked in your glove box last week when I borrowed your SUV to run grocery errands. His voice held no anger, only exhausted, quiet disappointment that stung harder than any argument ever could. I married her for companionship, not financial gain, and her personal savings are none of our business. Whether that $30,000 card exists or not, it's her private property, no strings attached to our marriage. I'm only terrified you'll get manipulated and hurt down the line, I shot back, throat tight with suppressed worry. All our relatives gossip planted that paranoia deep inside me, even if every surface-level detail about Martha reads completely harmless. Dad's smile softened, eyes glistening with quiet emotion as he stared out at the rose garden. I haven't felt this level of genuine peace since your mom drew her last breath. Give her the basic trust every spouse deserves, baby girl. Don't dig up old wounds just to feed your own unfounded fear. I left Dad's house an hour later, Martha carrying an insulated cooler bag stuffed with leftover cobbler to hand off to me by the front driveway, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying through the entire dishwashing chore. I pulled the debit card out of my purse one final time, pressing it back into her apron pocket while her guard slipped for a split second. This money belongs solely to you, Martha, and I won't accept a single dollar of your decades of hard-earned savings. The gold bracelet I gifted at the wedding is my genuine welcome to this family. We don't need large cash transfers to prove we accept one another. Martha's throat bobbed hard, tears spilling down her cheeks as she nodded rapid fire, too choked up to form a coherent reply. I climbed into my SUV and pulled away from the ranch's quiet street, staring at her tiny, hunched silhouette standing motionless on the concrete driveway through the rearview mirror until the neighborhood trees blocked her entirely from sight. My best friend Chloe called the second I merged onto the highway, voice buzzing with unfiltered curiosity through the car speakers. Spill every detail. Did your supposed gold digger stepmom pull some manipulative stunt after the wedding reception? I recounted the $30,000 debit card revelation in full, Chloe's shocked silence stretching 3 full seconds before she let out a shrill, disbelieving yell that crackled through the audio line. 30 grand? A lifelong minimum wage factory line worker cannot possibly save that volume of cash without illegal side work, hidden inheritances, or undisclosed settlement money she's hiding from your dad. You need to dig into every financial record, every old workplace lawsuit tied to her former textile plant. This math doesn't add up under any legal, legitimate income stream. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, highway traffic blurring past my windshield as Chloe's paranoid logic seeped into my already overtaxed mind. Digging deeper counts as a massive privacy violation against her, Chloe. If all this money came from a legitimate workplace injury settlement, I'd be destroying the fragile trust we've barely built by launching a full financial investigation behind her back. Your father's lifelong security matters more than her personal privacy. Chloe snapped, unyielding. Hire a financial records researcher, pull every bank statement dating back 10 years, track every large cash deposit to its original source. If that 30 grand stems from a shady settlement or unreported illegal income, your dad could get dragged into legal trouble down the line just for marrying her. I pulled my SUV over to a highway rest stop, killing the engine while scrolling through my phone contacts until I landed on Cole, my college roommate, now a licensed family law attorney with access to legitimate third-party financial record cross-check services. My thumb hovered over his contact photo for a full minute, torn between honoring Martha's fragile privacy and shielding Dad from potential hidden danger tied to her undisclosed finances. If I launched a full investigation and uncovered nothing suspicious, I'd irreparably fracture the tentative peace our newly blended family had barely managed to build. If I chose to ignore the glaring financial red flag and Martha hid dangerous secrets, Dad's entire retirement and family home could get swept up in legal fallout years down the road. I typed out a quick text to Cole before restarting the vehicle and merging back onto the highway. Can we book a consultation tomorrow afternoon? Need guidance on legally reviewing a spouse's undisclosed workplace settlement and hidden bank deposits without violating privacy statutes. As the text sent, my phone buzzed with a new incoming message from distant cousin Linda. Short, vicious gossip dropped straight into my inbox. Word circulating around the whole family Martha slipped you 30 grand wedding hush money to buy your silence about her plans to seize Arthur's property once he passes away. Everyone knew she'd pull some underhanded bribe stunt within 48 hours of the ceremony wrapping up. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, a new, sharper layer of conflict settling heavy over every thought swirling through my brain. I hadn't even uncovered the full truth about Martha's hidden $30,000 savings pool, yet the entire extended family had already crafted a malicious, one-sided narrative painting her as a manipulative, money-hungry con artist preying on Dad's old age loneliness. Every step I took to uncover the facts risked either betraying Martha or validating the family's cruel, unfounded assumptions about her character. I parked outside Cole's glass high-rise law office downtown the next afternoon, the sky stacked heavy gray storm clouds matching the knot coiled tight in my chest. I'd replayed every word Martha spoke about her factory injury 100 times overnight, picking apart every half-truth she'd slipped past Dad, but still couldn't square a small hospital stipend with $30,000 locked away in a debit card. The lobby's cold marble floors did nothing to calm my racing thoughts as I rode the elevator 20 floors up to his conference room. Cole slid a leather-bound legal notebook across the table the second I sat down, sharp eyes scanning my exhausted, underslept face. Let's lay all cards out first. If you run unauthorized bank pulls on Martha's accounts without her written consent, that's a civil privacy violation. She could sue for damages, no gray area. The only legal loophole is third-party public records, old factory injury lawsuits, corporate settlement filings, company bankruptcy documents. Those are fair game to research without her knowledge. I leaned forward, elbows braced on the polished wood table, laying out every detail from the wedding bracelet to the $30,000 card, her scarred forearm, the vague small compensation line she'd fed Dad. Cole jotted rapid notes, pausing once I finished the full timeline to tap his pen against the settlement section of his notebook. 5 years ago, industrial textile equipment lawsuits blew up statewide. Multiple fabric mills bought defective machinery from a defunct parts manufacturer called Western Textile Supply. Every worker maimed by their unguarded rollers got out-of-court lump settlements, most averaging 20 grand minimum. That's almost certainly the 20,000 bulk deposit you'll see on her statements if we dig public filings. A cold prickle ran down my spine. 20,000 from a corporate injury settlement, plus a decade of scraped-together minimum wage labor would add up to exactly 30,000 total. Math that finally lined up, but left a brand new, burning question hanging unspoken. If that money was pure, trauma-earned retirement security, why rush to hand it over to me the night of the wedding like she was desperate to offload it? Public records only tell half the story. I told Cole, there's something else pushing her to dump that cash on me. She didn't frame it as a gift. She called it peace offering, said she knew the whole family thought she was a grifter. Cole leaned back in his leather chair, folding his arms. Two common scenarios here. Either she's terrified her own blood family will drain that settlement dry, or she's hiding a debt tied to that money she doesn't want her father tangled up in. I've got a trusted private investigator I can refer. He only pulls public civil, corporate, and court records. No illegal account hacking. Stays fully within state privacy law. His retainer's $6 grand for 3 days of full background tracing. I transferred the deposit to his business account on the spot. My fingers steady despite the weight of what I was doing. This wasn't spite. This was damage control. If Martha carried hidden debts or illegal baggage that could sink Dad's quiet retirement, I needed to see it before it blew up our whole family. If she was entirely innocent, I'd bury every file, apologize fully, and never dig into her past again. That was the line I drew for myself. By the time I left the law firm, rain was slamming against my SUV windshield, thick sheets blurring the highway lanes. My phone buzzed nonstop the drive home. Chloe blowing up my texts demanding updates, Linda spamming the family group chat with new theories that Martha's settlement was hush money for covering up a factory safety death, and a strange unknown number sending blurry cell phone photos to my messages. I pulled over at a gas station to zoom in on the images, wiping rain streaks off my screen. The shots were taken outside a cheap roadside motel called Hallman, the neon sign glowing faded red in the background. A young man in a wrinkled discount suit stood screaming into Martha's face, his finger jammed inches from her nose while she hunched in on herself, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I recognized him instantly from Martha's brief mentions, Tyler, her son who supposedly worked steady warehouse labor 3 states away in Arizona. He wasn't supposed to be in our city. Worse, they weren't meeting at Dad's house. They were hiding out at a budget motel, screaming matches captured on camera by whoever sent the photos. I forwarded the entire batch to Cole's PI contact with a single line of text. Locate Tyler Carter, Martha's son. Track his employment history, credit debt, any active gambling or loan accounts. The PI hit me back an hour later with a preliminary snippet, short and brutal. Tyler resigned his Arizona warehouse job 4 months prior, evicted from his apartment, estranged from his wife and young daughter. Multiple active payday loan defaults and registered online gambling accounts on his social security number. MY's stomach dropped straight to my feet as I read the words. This was the missing piece I'd been hunting for. Martha's $30,000 life settlement wasn't just savings. It was a buffer against her own son's self-destructive debt spiral. That night, Dad called to invite me over for dinner. Martha whipping lemon garlic salmon, my favorite meal. I hesitated for 10 full minutes before agreeing, weighing if I'd confront her about Tyler's secret local visit mid-meal. I decided to hold my cards close until the PI's full report landed. Confronting her without hard proof would only make me sound paranoid, feeding every family member's worst assumptions about me hating her. When I walked through Dad's front door, the smell of roasted garlic flooded the entryway, Martha rushing out of the kitchen with an apron tied tight around her waist, flour dusted on her forearms. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, dark heavy exhaustion lingering under her lids like she hadn't slept a full night since the motel fight with Tyler. Salmon's almost finished. I picked up fresh asparagus from the farmer's market this morning, she said, rushing to pour me a glass of beach iced tea before I could even kick off my shoes. Dad sat on the living room couch tending to Mom's rose cuttings, glancing over his shoulder with a warm grin. Martha heard you've been stressed lately, said comfort food's the best medicine for overthinking everything. I settled at the dining table while Martha plated the meal, watching her subtle, constant nervous tics, twisting her wedding band around her finger, picking at the edge of her linen apron, glancing at her phone every 30 seconds like she expected a threatening text from Tyler to pop up. I waited until Dad stepped out back to water the rose bushes before I dropped a soft, targeted question into the quiet air between us. Heard Tyler's back in town recently. I ran into a mutual acquaintance that spotted him downtown last week. Martha's fork clattered hard against her ceramic plate, the silverware skittering across the tabletop, her face bleached pale, all color draining from her cheeks in a split second. She recovered fast, forcing a shaky, hollow laugh. Just a quick visit. He's only passing through for job interviews. Won't stick around long. Motel meetings aren't standard for quick job visits, I said, keeping my tone calm. No accusation sharp enough to trigger immediate defensiveness. Why didn't he stay here with you and Dad? The spare bedroom's fully furnished, plenty of space. Her lower lip trembled, fingers curling tight into fists in her lap. Before she could craft a half-baked excuse, Dad's footsteps crunched on the back patio concrete, cutting our tense exchange short. Martha snapped back into warm, pleasant host mode instantly, passing the extra salmon across the table, like our loaded conversation had never happened. Dinner dragged on in stifled, awkward small talk. Dad rambled about their planned autumn trip to the Colorado mountains, Martha nodding along robotically, never once volunteering a personal thought of her own. Every time Dad turned his head to refill his water glass, Martha shot me desperate, pleading glances across the table, silently begging me to drop the subject of Tyler entirely. After plates were cleared, Martha retreated to the kitchen to scrub dishes, locking herself away from conversation. Dad pulled me out onto the back porch, leaning against the wooden railing with a weary sigh, sunlight fading soft gold over the rose beds. You've got something weighing heavy on your chest about Martha and Tyler, don't you? He didn't wait for my confirmation, already reading the conflict written plain across my face. I can tell you're holding back questions, walking on eggshells around her every time family comes up. I stared out at the rose bushes Mom planted decades ago, choosing my words carefully to avoid sounding like I was digging up dirt behind his back. I found photos of Tyler screaming at her outside a motel last week. He's not working steady anymore. He's racked up thousands in unpaid loans and gambling debt from what I've learned. That $30,000 card she handed me at the wedding is her only safety net against his constant demands for cash, isn't it? Dad's shoulders sagged, his weathered hands gripping the porch rail hard enough to whiten his knuckles. He didn't deny a single word, no surprise crossing his features. I suspected Tyler was trouble months back. Martha gets private phone calls every night after I fall asleep, sneaking out to take them on the front driveway so I won't overhear the fighting. She never spelled out the gambling or debt, just said her son's going through a rough stretch she's trying to fix alone. She didn't want to drag me into his mess, thought I'd resent the burden of a troubled adult stepson. A sharp wave of guilt crashed over me. Dad hadn't been blind to Martha's pain this whole time. He'd quietly noticed every late-night phone call, every secret off-site meeting with Tyler, and chosen to give her space to share the truth on her own timeline, instead of prying and demanding answers like I had. My rush to hire a PI suddenly felt cruel, a betrayal of the quiet trust he'd extended toward her all along. Her settlement money is the only buffer she's got, Dad continued, voice soft with sorrow. Tyler hounds her nonstop for cash to pay off loan sharks, swears he'll get killed if he misses a payment deadline. She's terrified if she keeps that $30,000 in her own account, he'll manipulate or steal it out from under her. That's why she tried to hand it to you. If the money's yours, Tyler can't touch it, and she doesn't have to watch her life's trauma compensation vanish feeding his addiction cycle. The full weight of Martha's choice crashed down on me all at once. Every family member had painted her as a greedy gold digger chasing dad's assets, but the reality was the exact opposite. She'd spent 20 years breaking her body for minimum wage, lost full function in her forearm to a defective factory machine, won a small settlement meant to fund her old age alone, and watched her only son spiral into gambling debt that threatened to drain every last cent she'd earned through agony. She'd gifted me $30,000 not as a bribe, but as a desperate safeguard to keep her retirement safe from her own child's self-destruction. I pulled out my phone to text Cole's PI immediately, instructing him to pause all further deep dives into Martha's financial and personal history. There was no hidden scam, no scheme to steal Dad's house, only a broken mother drowning under the weight of her son's irreversible bad choices. Halfway through typing the message, the PI sent his full finalized report to my inbox, a wall of text confirming every detail Dad had just laid out, plus one brutal new bombshell that twisted the whole story into an even more heartbreaking reversal. 5 years prior, after receiving the $20,000 injury settlement, Martha had handed Tyler $8,000 to pay off his first wave of gambling debts, begging him to cut ties with loan companies and gaming sites. He'd blown the entire sum in under 2 weeks, hidden new loans from her, and cut off all contact for nearly a year until his debts ballooned to catastrophic levels. The debit card with the remaining $22,000 was all she had left to survive on in her 60s and 70s, and Tyler was threatening to harass both her and Dad nonstop unless she handed every last dollar over to him. I slipped back inside the house to find Martha leaning against the kitchen sink, silent tears streaming down her cheeks while she scrubbed a ceramic plate raw with a steel wool pad. I stepped up beside her, reaching out to gently take the scouring pad out of her trembling hands, setting it down on the counter beside the sink. "I know everything about Tyler's debt, the gambling, the settlement money, why you tried to give me that card at the wedding," I said, my voice stripped of all suspicion, only quiet empathy left. "You don't have to hide any of this from Dad or me anymore or your family. We don't let you carry this weight by yourself." Martha's knees buckled slightly, hand flying up to cover her mouth to muffle a broken sob. She leaned her forehead against my shoulder, decades of unspoken grief and fear pouring out in quiet, shaking cries against my blazer fabric. "I thought if I kept it all hidden, I wouldn't ruin the peace I finally found with Arthur," she whispered between gasps. "I worked my body to pieces for that money, lost half the use of my arm over a broken machine, and my own son keeps trying to take every penny I scraped together to survive old age. I couldn't stand the thought of dragging Arthur into this chaos after all his years of loneliness." Dad stepped into the kitchen doorway, watching us with glassy, tender eyes. He crossed the floor to wrap an arm around Martha's back, pulling her gently into his chest while she cried. No anger, no judgment, only quiet comfort. "We're a unit now, Martha. Tyler's trouble isn't just yours to bear alone. We'll figure out how to protect your savings, get him real help for his addiction, whatever it takes." Just as Dad finished speaking, my phone vibrated with a text from Linda, sent to the entire extended family group chat, full of unhinged, accusatory gossip that landed like a punch to the gut. "I just got word Martha's delinquent gambler son is hiding in town draining her savings. Obviously, she married Arthur solely to use his house as a hiding spot for her son's loan mess. She's gonna saddle all of us with his debt before the year's out." I stared at the screen, cold frustration burning in my chest. Every secret Martha carried to protect our blended family was being twisted into malicious gossip by my own blood relatives, painting her as a scheming parasite rather than a grieving, exhausted mother trapped by her child's self-destruction. A critical crossroads sat in front of me. I could either let the false rumors fester and chip away at Martha's fragile sense of belonging, or step forward publicly to lay out the full, painful truth and defend the woman my father loved.